The message traveled across the stars like a scream in the night. It moved through empty space, past dead moons and dying suns, until it reached every corner of the known galaxy. The words were simple. The words were desperate. "We are under attack. We need help. Please come." Elder Voss stood in the great hall of the Helix Coalition and watched the message go out. He was old, even by the standards of his long-lived species. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had watched wars begin and end, but he had never felt fear like this before. The Harrow had come. No one knew where they came from. Some said they crawled out of the dark spaces between galaxies. Others believed they were older than the stars themselves, but everyone agreed on one thing: the Harrow consumed everything. They were not an army. They were not a fleet. They were a hunger given form. Billions of biomechanical creatures moving as one mind, one purpose. They did not negotiate. They did not stop. They simply devoured. 3 border worlds had already gone silent. Millions of lives erased in days. Voss had sent the distress signal to every known civilization. The Coalition had allies. They had treaties. They had promises written in the blood of ancient wars. Surely, when the darkness came, those promises would mean something. The responses came quickly. The Korath, with their mighty warships, swore to fight. The Sindari promised their war machines. The Morath, the Velix, the Keth, 12 species in total, pledged their strength to the Coalition. Voss allowed himself to hope. Together they would push back the Harrow. Together they would survive. But there was one more response. A small one. From a young species that the galaxy barely noticed. The humans. Far away, on a carrier ship called the Endurance, Captain Kang Tae read the distress signal for the 3rd time. The bridge was quiet. His crew watched him, waiting for orders. Tae was not a remarkable man by any measure. He was 43 years old, with gray appearing in his black hair and lines forming around his eyes. He had spent 20 years in the Earth fleet, most of it doing patrol work and cargo escorts. He had never fought in a real war. None of them had. Humanity was young to the stars. Only 40 years had passed since first contact. In that time, humans had learned a hard truth. The galaxy did not care about them. To the ancient species of the Coalition, humans were primitives. Their ships were slow, their weapons were crude. Their lifespans were laughably short. At diplomatic meetings, humans were tolerated but never respected. Lieutenant Commander Park Yuna stood beside Tae, reading the tactical data on her screen. She was younger than him, sharp-minded and practical. "Captain, the threat assessment is severe. The Harrow have already destroyed 3 worlds. Our weapons may not even damage them." "I know," Tae said quietly. "The Coalition has 12 allied fleets responding. They have technology far beyond ours. They do not need us." "I know that too." Yuna hesitated. "Then why are we still here?" Tae looked at the message again. "We are under attack. We need help. Please come." "Because they asked," he said. In the fighter bay, pilot Lee Hana was checking her ship when she heard the announcement. All hands to stations. Course change. They were heading to Velthari space. Hana was 26 years old and had more flight hours than anyone on the ship. She was also, by her own admission, slightly insane. She flew like she had nothing to lose, which made her either the best pilot in the fleet or the most dangerous. Probably both. She found Sergeant Choi Woo in the armory, cleaning his rifle. Woo was a large man, quiet and solid like a mountain. He led the ground forces on the Endurance, 52 Marines who trusted him with their lives. "You heard?" Hana asked. Woo nodded. "We are going to fight. Against something that eats planets." "Yes." Hana leaned against the doorway. "You scared?" Woo thought about it for a moment. "Yes, but I am still going." That was the thing about humans, Hana thought. They were always scared. They were small and fragile, and their lives were short. but they went anyway. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Kim Nari was already making preparations. She was the oldest crew member on the ship, 51 years old, with oil-stained hands and a mind that never stopped working. She knew the Endurance better than anyone. She knew its strengths and its limits. She knew exactly how much the old ship could take before it broke. When Captain Tay called her on the comm, she answered without looking up from her work. "Nari, how long can you keep us fighting?" "Against what?" "The worst thing in the galaxy." Nari paused. She ran calculations in her head. 12 hours. Maybe more if I get creative." Get creative. The Endurance changed course. It was not a fast ship. It was not a powerful ship. It was just a carrier, built for transport and light defense. Against the Harrow, it would be like throwing a stone at a storm. But Captain Tay had made his decision. Park Yuna had made hers. Lee Hana, Choi Woo, Kim Nari, every member of the crew had made theirs. They knew the odds. They knew they might die. They went anyway. Because far away on a world they had never seen, people they had never met were crying for help. And that was enough. The Endurance flew toward the darkness, carrying 400 humans who had decided that some things mattered more than survival. They did not know what waited for them. They did not know that the promised allies would flee. They did not know that they would soon stand alone against the end of everything. They only knew that someone had asked for help, and humans always answered. The Endurance arrived at Velthari Prime after 11 days of travel. When the ship dropped out of hyperspace, Park Yuna gasped at what she saw on the sensors. Ships, hundreds of them, thousands of them. The Allied fleet stretched across the void like a wall of steel and fire. Korath battlecruisers, each one larger than a city, Sindari war platforms bristling with weapons, Morath destroyers, Velix carriers, ships from a dozen species, all gathered in one place. For the first time since leaving Earth, Yuna felt hope. "Look at them," she whispered. "We might actually win this." Captain Tay stood at the observation window watching the fleet. The Endurance looked small among these giants. It was like a fishing boat floating beside battleships. But they were here. They had come to help. That was what mattered. The Coalition Command Center contacted them immediately. Elder Voss appeared on the screen, his ancient face lined with exhaustion. "Human vessel, we are grateful for your presence. Please take position at the rear of the formation. Your ship is not designed for frontline combat." Tay nodded. "Understood. We will support however we can." The Endurance moved into position. Lee Hana prepared her fighter squadron. Choi Woo briefed his Marines. Kim Nari ran diagnostics on every system. They were ready. Then the Harrow arrived. It did not come like a fleet. It did not come like an army. It came like a tide of darkness swallowing the stars themselves. The sensors screamed warnings. Yuna stared at her screen in horror. The numbers made no sense. Billions of contacts. Billions. A living wall of biomechanical creatures stretching from one end of the horizon to the other. Each creature was small, maybe the size of a fighter, but there were so many of them that they blocked out the light from distant suns. The swarm moved as one. It pulsed and flowed like a single organism, and at the center of it, something vast and terrible waited. A mind. A hunger, the heart of the Harrow. For a long moment, no one spoke. The Allied fleet, so mighty and proud just minutes ago, seemed suddenly fragile. The Korath fired first. Their weapons were the most advanced in the galaxy. Beams of pure energy cut through space, vaporizing thousands of Harrow creatures instantly. For a moment, it seemed like it might work. But the Harrow adapted. The swarm shifted. It changed. Within minutes, the Korath weapons became less effective. The creatures were learning, evolving, becoming resistant. What killed them before only wounded them now. Commander Rin of the Korath fleet watched the battle data with growing terror. He was a decorated warrior. He had never lost a battle, but he had also never seen anything like this. All Korath vessels, he announced, his voice breaking. "Initiate withdrawal. Repeat, initiate withdrawal." The mighty Korath fleet turned and ran. On the Endurance, Yuna watched the sensors in disbelief. "Captain, the Korath are retreating." Tay said nothing. He watched the screen as more contacts began to move. The Sindari were leaving. The Morath were leaving. One by one, the promised allies abandoned their positions. Ships that had sworn to fight were now racing toward hyperspace, leaving trails of light as they fled. Within 2 hours, the great Allied fleet was gone. The sky that had been filled with hope was now empty and dark. Only a handful of vessels remained. Damaged ships that could not escape. Slow transports filled with refugees. Medical frigates with no weapons. And the Endurance. Elder Voss watched from the command center on the planet below. His hands trembled. Every promise, every treaty, every oath of alliance, all meaningless. When the darkness came, the galaxy had chosen to run. His assistant approached him carefully. "Elder, the human ship is still in orbit." Voss looked at the sensor display. The tiny human carrier, so insignificant among giants, had not moved. It sat there in the void, alone, facing the approaching swarm. "Contact them," Voss said. "Tell them to leave. There is no reason for them to die here." On the planet's surface, in a shelter packed with frightened civilians, a young girl named Lyra pressed her face against the observation window. She was 12 years old, small and thin, with large eyes that had seen too much in recent days. Her mother held her close. "Do not look, child. It will be over soon." But Lyra kept looking. She watched the sky, where the darkness was growing. She watched the trails of light as the great fleets fled. And she watched the single human ship that remained, like a tiny light refusing to go out. "Mother, why do the humans not leave?" Her mother shook her head. "I do not know. Perhaps they do not understand. Perhaps they are too primitive to know that they cannot win." Lyra thought about that. She had learned about humans in school. They were newcomers. They were weak. They lived short lives and had simple technology. The teachers had called them insignificant, but the insignificant ones were still here, and the mighty ones had fled. On the Endurance, Captain Tay received the message from Elder Voss. The old alien's voice was filled with grief. "Human vessel, you have done enough. You came when we called. That is more than we deserved. But you cannot fight this. You cannot win. Please, save yourselves." Tay looked at his crew. Yuna stood at her station, pale but steady. Hana was already in her flight suit. Wu was with his Marines. Nari was in the engine room, ready to work miracles with failing systems. None of them were running. Tay opened the comm channel. His voice was calm. "Elder Voss, how many civilians are still on the planet?" There was a pause. "Nearly 2 million. We cannot evacuate them in time." "Then we are not leaving." The channel went silent. Then Voss spoke again, his voice breaking. "You will die." "Maybe," Tay replied. "But we did not come here to survive. We came here to help." He closed the channel and looked out at the approaching darkness. The Harrow was coming. It would reach the planet in hours. And when it did, the Endurance would be waiting. Not because they could win, but because someone had to stay. The darkness grew closer with every passing minute. On the bridge of the Endurance, the crew could see the Harrow on the main screen now, not just as sensor contacts, but with their own eyes. A wall of living death, blocking out the stars. Captain Tay stood at the center of the bridge, hands clasped behind his back. He had not slept in 36 hours. None of them had. There was no time for sleep now. Park Yuna worked at her station, calculating and recalculating. She was trying to find a strategy, any strategy that gave them a chance. But the numbers were brutal. The Harrow outnumbered them by billions. The Endurance had weapons designed to fight pirates, not swarms. Every calculation ended the same way. They would lose. "Captain," Una said finally, "I have run every simulation. Our weapons will destroy some of them, maybe thousands, but there are billions. We cannot stop them." Tay nodded slowly. "I know. If we fight, we will die. All of us. I know that too." Una turned to face him. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, but her voice was steady. "Then why are we still here?" Tay was quiet for a moment. He looked around the bridge, at the crew members who had followed him into this darkness. They were young, most of them. They had families back on Earth. They had futures that would never happen now. "Una," he said softly, "there are 2 million people on that planet. Children, families. They cannot fight. They cannot run. If we leave, the Harrow will consume them all. We cannot save them. We are one ship. Maybe not, but we can buy them time. Every minute we fight is a minute for evacuation shuttles to escape. Every hour we hold is an hour for people to reach safety." He paused. "We cannot save everyone, but we can save some. Is that not worth dying for?" Una had no answer. She turned back to her station and began working on a new set of calculations. Not for victory now, just for time. In the fighter bay, Lee Hanna gathered her squadron. 24 pilots standing in a circle around her. They were scared. She could see it in their eyes. She was scared too. "Listen," she said. "I am not going to lie to you. This is probably our last flight. The Harrow will adapt to our weapons. They will overwhelm us eventually, but we are going to make them pay for every inch." A young pilot named Sung raised his hand. "Lieutenant, what are we fighting for? We cannot win." Hanna smiled, but it was not a happy smile. "We are fighting for time. Every minute we survive, evacuation shuttles escape. Every swarm creature we destroy is one that will not reach the surface." She looked at each of them in turn. "When I was a child, my grandmother told me something. She said that courage is not about winning. Courage is about standing up when everyone else sits down. Today, we stand." The pilots nodded. Fear was still in their eyes, but something else was there too now. Determination. In the armory, Choi Woo addressed his Marines. 52 soldiers, fully armed and ready for ground combat. They would deploy to the surface when the Harrow breached the atmosphere. They would protect evacuation points for as long as possible. "We are going down there to buy time," Woo told them. "Hold the line. Protect the civilians. Fall back when necessary, but never run. If you fall, the soldier next to you will continue. If they fall, the next one will. We are a chain, and chains do not break." A Marine named Tora spoke up. "Sergeant, will anyone remember what we do here?" Woo considered the question. "Maybe. Maybe not. But that is not why we fight. We fight because it is right. Whether the galaxy remembers or forgets, we will know what we did. That is enough." In the engine room, Kim Nari worked alone. Her hands moved over controls with practiced ease, adjusting power levels, rerouting systems, squeezing every bit of performance from the old ship. Captain Tay called her on the comm. "Nari, status report. I have increased weapon efficiency by 18%. Shields are at maximum. I can keep us fighting for 12 hours, maybe 14 if I push the reactors past safety limits." "Do it." Nari smiled grimly. "Already started. Captain, there is one more thing. I have been studying the Harrow's attack patterns. They target power signatures. If we overload the reactor at the right moment, we could take out a significant portion of the swarm." Tay understood what she was saying. "A suicide run. Only as a last resort, when there is nothing left to save." "Understood. Thank you, Nari." "Captain, it has been an honor serving with you." Tay closed the channel. He walked to the main screen and looked at the Harrow. It was beautiful in a terrible way. A river of darkness flowing through space. He opened a wide channel, broadcasting to all remaining ships in the system, to the damaged vessels, the refugee transports, the planet below, to any allied ships that might still be listening as they fled. This is Captain Kang Tae of the Earth vessel Endurance. To all who can hear me, we are staying. Not because we can win, not because we are brave, but because someone has to stand between the darkness and the light. He paused, gathering his thoughts. On Earth, we have a saying. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. Today, we choose to do something. Today, we choose to fight. And if this is our end, then let it be said that humans did not run. Let it be said that when all others fled, the humans stayed. The transmission ended. Across the sector, in fleeing ships and hidden bunkers, beings of a dozen species heard those words. On the surface of Velthari Prime, in the crowded shelter, Lyra listened to the human captain's voice. She did not understand all the words, but she understood the meaning. The humans were not leaving. The humans were going to fight. Her mother held her tighter. "They are fools," she whispered. "Brave fools." But Lyra shook her head. "No, Mother. They are heroes." The Harrow reached attack range. The darkness descended upon the Endurance like a tsunami of death, and the humans opened fire. The first wave of the Harrow crashed against the Endurance like a storm hitting a rock. Thousands of creatures swarmed toward the ship, their biomechanical bodies glowing with terrible energy. The ship's weapons fired without pause, cutting lines of destruction through the swarm. Park Yuna coordinated the defense from the bridge. Her voice was calm, steady, even as chaos erupted around her. "Redirect power to forward shields. Concentrate fire on the dense clusters. Do not waste ammunition on scattered targets." Captain Tae stood beside her, watching the battle unfold on the tactical display. For every Harrow creature they destroyed, 10 more took its place. The swarm was endless, a living ocean of death. "Evacuation status?" Tae asked. 17 shuttles have escaped the planet so far. Another 43 are loading, but we need more time. Then we give them more time. In the darkness of space, Lee Hana led her fighters into the heart of the swarm. Her squadron flew in tight formation, weapons blazing. The Harrow creatures were fast and adaptive, but Hana was faster. She flew like a woman possessed, spinning and diving through gaps in the swarm that should not exist. "Stay together!" she shouted into the comm. "Cover each other!" A Harrow creature latched onto the wing of a fighter beside her. Pilot Sung screamed as his ship began to spin. Without hesitation, Hana dove toward him, blasting the creature away with precise fire. Sung regained control, his voice shaking with gratitude. "Thank you, Lieutenant. Thank me later." "Keep flying!" The battle was brutal. Fighters fell one by one, consumed by the endless swarm. But for every human ship that died, dozens of shuttles escaped below. The fighters were buying time with their lives. On the planet's surface, Choi Woo led his Marines through the burning streets of the capital city. The Harrow had begun to break through the orbital defenses, sending landing swarms to the ground. The creatures poured from the sky like rain, crashing into buildings and tearing through anything in their path. But Woo and his soldiers held the evacuation zone. "Form a perimeter," Woo commanded. "Nothing gets through." The Marines fought with everything they had. Rifles blazed, grenades exploded. When ammunition ran low, they used whatever they could find. A Marine named Dal picked up a metal pipe and smashed a Harrow creature that had breached the line. Another soldier, Jay, used a construction vehicle to crush a group of attackers. The Velthari civilians watched in amazement. They had never seen anything like this. The humans fought without hesitation, without retreat. They were outnumbered beyond reason, but they did not stop. A young Velthari man approached Wu during a brief pause in the fighting. "Why do you fight so hard? You do not know us. We are not your people." Wu reloaded his rifle without looking up. Today you are our people. Today everyone is. The fighting continued. Back in space, the Endurance was taking heavy damage. Fires burned in multiple sections. Shields were failing. The hull was breached in 3 places. Kim Nari worked miracles in the engine room, rerouting power, patching systems, keeping the ship alive through sheer will. "Captain," she called over the comm, "we have lost the secondary weapons array. Port shields are gone. I am redirecting everything to the main guns." "How long can we last?" 3 hours, maybe 4. It had been 8 hours since the battle began. 8 hours of constant fighting. The crew was exhausted, wounded, dying. But they kept fighting. On the bridge, a young officer named Bo collapsed at his station. He was bleeding from a head wound and his eyes were unfocused. Yuna rushed to help him. "I am fine," Bo mumbled. "I can keep working." "You need medical attention." Later, after the battle, Yuna helped him back into his chair. There was no medical team to spare. Everyone who could fight was fighting. Everyone who could not was helping evacuate. Captain Tay received a transmission from the planet's surface. Elder Voss's face appeared on the screen. The ancient alien was weeping. "Captain Tay, we have evacuated 1.2 million civilians, over half the population, because of you." Tay felt a wave of emotion, but he pushed it down. "How many shuttles are left?" "The last wave is loading now. Another 300,000 can escape, but they need 30 more minutes." "They will have it." The Harrow sensed that victory was slipping away. The swarm intensified its attack, focusing everything on the Endurance. Creatures slammed into the ship by the thousands, trying to tear it apart. In the fighter bay, only 6 fighters remained. Lihana was among them. Her ship was damaged, 1 engine dead, weapons running low, but she was still flying. All fighters, "Form on me," she ordered. "We are going to punch a hole through the swarm. Buy the ship some breathing room." The 6 fighters dove into the mass of Harrow creatures. It was suicide, and they knew it. But they went anyway. Hana's fighter was hit. Warning lights flashed everywhere. She could feel the ship dying around her. But she kept firing, kept fighting, kept flying. Then the sensors screamed. New contacts. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Hana looked up through the cracked canopy of her fighter. What she saw made her laugh out loud. Ships. Korath warships dropping out of hyperspace. Sindari platforms. Morath destroyers. The fleets that had fled were returning. Commander Rin's voice came over the open channel. His words were heavy with shame. "Human vessel Endurance, this is Commander Rin of the Korath fleet. We heard your transmission. We heard your crew fighting and dying while we ran." His voice broke. "We cannot undo our cowardice, but we can stand with you now." More and more ships arrived. The allies who had fled were coming back. They had heard the humans fighting. They had heard the sacrifice, and they had felt something they had not felt in centuries. Shame. And then, slowly, courage. On the bridge of the Endurance, Captain Tay watched the Allied ships pour into the battle. Fresh weapons tore into the Harrow. Fresh shields protected the planet. The tide was turning. "Captain," Yuna said, her voice trembling with exhaustion and hope, "we might actually win this." Tay slumped into his chair. His ship was burning. Half his crew was dead. He had not slept in almost 2 days. But they were still here, and now they were not alone. "Continue fighting," he said quietly, "until everyone is safe." The combined fleet pressed the attack. The Harrow, faced with overwhelming force, began to retreat. The endless swarm which had consumed worlds was finally breaking. And at the center of the battle, burning but unbroken, the Endurance held the line. The Harrow retreated into the darkness between stars. The combined fleet pursued them for 3 days, driving them further and further from Coalition space. When the last swarm creature vanished into the void, a silence fell over the galaxy. It was over. They had won. But victory had come at a terrible price. The Endurance drifted in orbit above Velthari Prime, barely holding together. The once proud carrier was now a scarred ruin. Hull breaches covered its surface. Entire sections were dark and airless. Of the 400 crew members who had traveled to fight, only 167 survived. Captain Kang Tae sat in his command chair, his arm wrapped in bandages, his uniform torn and stained. He had not left the bridge since the battle ended. He could not. There was too much to do, too many wounded to care for, too many dead to mourn. Park Yuna stood beside him, equally exhausted. She held a datapad with the casualty list. Reading the names hurt more than any wound. "Captain," she said softly, "we should rest. The medical team insists." Tae shook his head. "Not yet. I want to see them first." He rose from his chair and walked through the damaged corridors of his ship. Every step showed him the cost of their stand. Scorch marks on the walls, blood stains on the floor, emergency patches covering holes that opened to space. But also, life. Wounded crew members helping each other, engineers already starting repairs. The ship was broken, but the people were not. In the fighter bay, Lee Hana was sitting on the wing of her destroyed fighter. It would never fly again. Neither would most of the squadron. Of the 24 pilots who had launched, only 9 had returned. Tae sat beside her. They did not speak for a long time. Finally, Hana broke the silence. "Sung made it. He wanted me to thank you for authorizing the mission." "Thank him for me. For all of them." Hana nodded. Her eyes were distant, looking at something far away. "Do you think it was worth it? All those lives lost?" Tae considered the question carefully. "I asked myself that same thing. Then I remembered the shuttle reports. 1.5 million civilians escaped because we held the line. Children who will grow up, families who will stay together, lives that will continue because we chose to fight." He paused. "I think that is worth something." Hana wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Yeah, I think so too." On the planet's surface, Choi Woo gathered his surviving Marines. Of the 52 who had deployed, 31 remained. They stood in formation outside the evacuation zone, dirty and wounded but still standing. Velthari civilians lined the streets, watching them in silence. These strange, primitive beings had fought and died for people they had never met. The aliens did not understand it, but they were grateful beyond words. A small figure broke from the crowd and ran toward Wu. It was Lyra, the young girl who had watched the human ship from the shelter window. She stopped in front of the massive sergeant and looked up at him with wide eyes. "Thank you," she said simply. Wu knelt down so he was at her eye level. His face, usually so stern, softened. "You are welcome, little one. Will you come back someday?" Wu smiled. It was not something he did often. "If you ever need us, we will come. That is what humans do." 1 month later, the Coalition held a ceremony on Velthari Prime. Representatives from 30 species gathered in the Great Hall. It was the largest assembly in the history of the Coalition. Captain Kang Tae stood at the center, surrounded by his surviving crew. His arm was still healing. Beside him stood Yuna, Hana, Wu, and Nari. They wore clean uniforms now, decorated with honors from the Earth Fleet, but they carried the weight of everything they had lost. Elder Voss stepped forward. The ancient leader moved slowly, his age showing more than ever before, but his voice was strong. "We sent a cry into the void," he began. "We begged for help. Many answered with words. Many promised their strength. But when the darkness came, they fled. Their promises meant nothing." He turned to face the humans. Only one species answered with blood. Only one species stayed when all hope was lost. The humans came not because they could win, but because we needed them. They taught us what courage truly means. It is not the absence of fear. It is the choice to stand when everything tells you to run. Voss approached Tay and bowed deeply, a gesture of highest respect. Captain Kang Tay, on behalf of the Helix Coalition and all the species we represent, thank you. Thank you for staying. Thank you for fighting. Thank you for showing us what we had forgotten. Tay bowed in return. We came because you called. We stayed because it was right. After the ceremony, as the crowds dispersed, Lyra found her way to Captain Tay. She carried a small crystal in her hands, a Velthari token of eternal gratitude. She presented it to him solemnly. "This is for you," she said, "so you will always remember us." Tay accepted the crystal carefully. "I will never forget. None of us will." Lyra hesitated, then asked the question that had been in her mind since the battle. "Why did you stay? You did not know us. We were strangers." Tay knelt down, just as Wu had done. He looked into her young eyes and spoke honestly. "Because when we heard your cry for help, we saw ourselves. We were once alone in the darkness too, scared and small. No one came for us then, but we remembered that feeling, and we decided that if anyone ever felt that way again, we would answer, no matter the cost." Lyra nodded slowly. She did not fully understand, but someday she would. The Endurance was repaired over the following months. It would fly again, carry a new crew, face new challenges. The humans who had died were honored with memorials across the galaxy. Their names became part of Coalition history, spoken with reverence by species who had once dismissed humanity as primitive. On Earth, a monument was built. It stood in the center of a great plaza, listing the names of every crew member of the Endurance. At the base of the monument, a simple inscription was carved into the stone. "We came because you called. We stayed because it was right." Visitors from across the galaxy traveled to see it. They came to understand what made humans different. Not their technology, not their strength, but their hearts. Their stubborn, foolish, beautiful hearts that refused to abandon those in need. The story spread to every corner of known space. It became legend. Parents told it to their children, teachers taught it in schools, and always the lesson was the same. When the darkness came, when hope died, when all others fled, the humans chose to stay and fight, not because they could win, but because it was right.